Hello friends, welcome to the world of science fiction and forgotten words, Alien Universe. Don't forget to like, subscribe and never miss a new stories and movies from this channel. Thank you.
A ripple of shock moved through the arena like a sudden storm. The massive alloy beam, meant only as a toy for young Vaer trainees, hovered a few centimeters above the ground in Daniel's shaking hands. Warning lights flickered along the support pillars, their sharp red glow cutting through the dim arena atmosphere. Thousands of alien spectators leaned forward, breath and pain. The beam felt like a mountain pressing into his bones. His fingers were numb, his forearms burning, as if molten metal ran beneath his skin. Every instinct screamed for him to drop it, to step away before something inside him tore apart. But another voice, quieter yet stronger, kept repeating one thought, just a little more. Across the battlefield, Captain Droxel uncrossed his arms. The towering warrior stepped closer, heavy footsteps echoing across the stone floor. Eyes scanned Daniel with a focus that was no longer amused, but analytical, almost cautious. It was identity. His species measured worth through dominance, victories, and visible might. Yet the creature before him defied that logic, a fragile-looking being, trembling, sweating, but still lifting. Interesting, Droxel murmured, the translator carrying his voice across the silent arena. You persist beyond rational limits. Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't. His jaw was locked, his lungs fighting for oxygen as he forced the beam higher. The beam now floated nearly a hand's width above the ground. The arena, "Hey," I chimed, its neutral tone somehow sounding surprised. Human subject demonstrating elevated performance. Gasps turned into scattered applause from a few distant spectators. The Vaer Dominion had conquered countless species, catalogued their capabilities, and predicted their limits with near-perfect accuracy. Yet this human was operating outside prediction models. Daniel's arm suddenly buckled. The beam dropped slightly, slamming back toward the stabilizers. With a metallic thud, pain shot through his shoulders, and a groan escaped his throat. His vision blurred, dark spots flickering at the edges. For a moment, defeat hovered dangerously close. Droxel watched carefully. Most competitors broke here, at the moment when effort stopped feeling heroic and started feeling pointless. The moment when pain outweighed pride. He shifted his grip. It was a small movement, almost unnoticeable, but Droxel caught it immediately. The human adjusted his stance, repositioning his feet for leverage rather than brute force. His breathing changed too, becoming slower, rhythmic, controlled. Droxel's eyes narrowed. He adapts, the captain whispered. Daniel inhaled deeply, then pushed again. This time, the beam rose more steadily. Not higher than before, but smoother, guided by balance instead of desperation. The trembling didn't vanish, yet it transformed into something manageable, like a storm contained within boundaries. The crowd sensed it. Whispers spread, layered, with something unfamiliar to the arena, respect. A group of smaller alien spectators, near the lower tiers, began tapping their claws together, producing a soft, rhythmic sound. Others joined hesitantly. It wasn't cheering, not yet, but it wasn't mockery either. It was recognition. Droxel stepped even closer until he stood only meters away. His massive shadow stretched over Daniel, but the human didn't look up. His focus remained locked on the beam, on the task, on the single objective that mattered. Why? Droxel asked, voice quieter now. The question wasn't for entertainment. It was genuine. Daniel held the beam for another strained second before slowly lowering it back onto the stabilizers. The metal settled with a heavy clang, and Daniel stumbled backward, collapsing onto one knee. His chest heaved, lungs gulping air as if he had been underwater. The arena remained silent, waiting. Daniel wiped sweat from his face, and finally looked up at the towering captain. Because quitting doesn't help, he said between breaths. Simplicity of the answer echoed strangely across the vast structure. Droxel studied him for a long moment. Within the captain's memory banks were countless records of strength demonstrations, battles, and executions. Most were predictable. Power met with power, victory determined by mass and weaponry. But this was different. This was strength without certainty of success. A concept the Veer rarely encountered. You understand, Droxel said slowly, that lifting the beam was only the preliminary display. A low rumble spread through the arena as the floor panels began shifting. Daniel's exhaustion vanished beneath a wave of tension. The central platform split apart, revealing a descending chamber beneath the arena. From its depths rose a circular apparatus surrounded by glowing containment fields. Mechanical arms unfolded like metallic limbs, carrying an object that looked less like equipment and more like a piece of collapsed architecture. A sphere of dense gravity alloy. Even Droxel's expression changed slightly. The true trial, announced the Arena A, requires direct competition. The sphere settled between them with a thunderous impact that shook the stands. This core weighs the equivalent of a small star fragment, the AI continued. Objective: relocate the core beyond designated boundary. Contestants: Captain Droxel and human subject Daniel Cross. A wave of electrified anticipation swept through the spectators. This was no longer a demonstration. It was a contest. Daniel stared at the sphere, its surface warping light around it, making the air shimmer like heat above desert sand. The beam had nearly broken him, and this object dwarfed it in both size and density. Across from him, Droxel rolled his shoulders, biometal plates sliding smoothly over muscle. The captain's voice rumbled softly, meant only for Daniel, but carried by the translator anyway. You have already surpassed expectation, human. Withdraw now, and you will leave with honor. Daniel's gaze stayed on the sphere. His body ached, his arms felt hollow, and logic whispered that Droxel was offering mercy disguised as dignity. Walking away would be reasonable, sensible, safe. But then Daniel remembered something. Not a moment of strength, but a moment of laughter back on Earth. Friends teasing him for overworking, his sister calling him stubborn, his father once saying that humans were strange because they kept trying long after victory seemed impossible. Daniel slowly stood. He flexed his sore fingers and looked directly at Droxel. I didn't come this far to watch. The arena lights intensified, casting long shadows around both competitors. Droxel's eyes glowed brighter, and somewhere deep within the Veer captain's thoughts, a feeling began forming. Not superiority, not amusement, but curiosity mixed with something dangerously close to anticipation. The gravity sphere rested between them like a silent challenge, its dark surface bending reflections into twisted shapes. Even standing several steps away, Daniel could feel its pull, a subtle downward pressure that made the air feel heavier, and each breath slightly harder to draw. The arena's temperature dropped as containment fields hummed around the object, but understandable. Weight was weight. Force was force. This sphere, however, felt unnatural. Like lifting it would mean arguing with gravity itself. Across from him, Captain Droxel stepped forward first. The massive warrior placed one armored hand on the sphere. The arena floor groaned softly beneath. His weight as he tested the object, fingers tightening against its smooth surface. His muscles shifted beneath biometal plates, glowing seams pulsing faintly as internal power systems activated. A murmur of excitement spread through the spectators. Droxel inhaled once, deeply, and lifted. The sphere rose, not dramatically, not effortlessly, but undeniably. The captain held it there for several seconds before lowering it back with controlled, precision. Applause erupted instantly. For the Veer, this was expected. Their champion performing beyond ordinary limits was normal. Predictable, comforting. But Droxel didn't celebrate. Instead, he looked at Daniel. Your turn, the translator echoed. Daniel approached slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. The sphere seemed to pull him forward and downward at the same time, a paradox that made his balance feel uncertain. When he finally stood before it, he hesitated, not out of fear of pain, but fear of failure. The arena waited. Thousands of eyes watched, analyzing, judging, predicting. Somewhere among them were officers who had captured his crew, strategists who would use the result to reinforce conclusions about humanity's place in the galaxy. Daniel placed his hands on the sphere. Cold. Impossibly cold. It felt less like touching metal and more like touching absence, a void that consumed warmth. His palms tingled instantly, tiny vibrations traveling up his arms as the containment field reacted to foreign contact. He tightened his grip. Nothing happened. Daniel pushed. Still nothing. The sphere didn't even tremble. Few quiet chuckles returned. To the stands, cautious but present. Muscles tightening, veins rising beneath his skin. His boots dug into the arena floor as he strained, every fiber in his body firing commands that gravity ignored completely. The sphere remained unmoved. Frustration flickered across Daniel's face. Droxel watched carefully, noticing more than the crowd could see. The micro-adjustments in Daniel's posture, the controlled breathing, the refusal to step back. The human wasn't panicking. He was analyzing. He searches for method. Others resumed casual conversations. The novelty seemed over. The story was returning to its expected ending. Daniel stepped back, staring at the sphere as if it were a puzzle rather than an obstacle. Back on Earth, lifting had never been about ego. It had been about problem solving. Moving machinery required angles, leverage, teamwork, timing. Raw strength helped, but thinking mattered more. And that was when Daniel noticed it. The sphere wasn't perfectly still. Tiny fluctuations rippled across its containment field. The mechanical arms that had delivered it remained connected through thin stabilizer cables, each pulsing faintly with energy. Daniel's eyes narrowed. The weight was real. His head, intrigued by the human's sudden stillness. You observe, Droxel said. Daniel nodded slightly. You didn't just lift it. Technicians in the control tier exchanged confused glances. Droxel's glowing eyes flickered with interest. Explain. Daniel gestured toward the stabilizer. Cables. You lifted it with the system. Your grip matched the field oscillation. You weren't fighting gravity. You were syncing with it. A hush spread across the arena. Drox Hill stared at him for several seconds before a low rumble of laughter escaped his chest. Not mocking. I fix engines. For a living, the captain said. Daniel stepped forward once more, but this time he didn't grab the sphere immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes. The arena lights hummed overhead. The containment field pulsed. Daniel listened not with ears. The rhythm of energy flowing through the stabilizers, the almost musical oscillation of the gravity field. It reminded him of standing beside a running engine, feeling its pattern before touching a single tool. When Daniel opened his eyes again, something had changed. He placed his hands on the sphere. Waited. Adjusted his stance. Waited again. The crowd leaned forward unconsciously. Droxel's four eyes widened slightly, and then, moving in perfect timing with the containment pulse, Daniel lifted. The sphere trembled. A collective gasp filled the arena. Daniel strained, but this time the resistance felt different, less absolute, more negotiable. The sphere rose a fraction, then another. Chin, as he held the sphere suspended for a single fragile moment before gently lowering. Daniel rested his hands on his knees, breathing heavily. We've had practice. But the atmosphere remained charged, electric with unspoken realization. What began as entertainment had transformed into revelation. Humans were not the strongest, but they were something. Else entirely as technicians prepared the next phase, Droxel studied Daniel with growing intensity. Within the captain's strategic mind, calculations shifted, predictions recalibrated, assumptions weakened, because the contest was no longer about who could. One figure leaned forward and spoke for the first time since the trial began. Prepare the champion protocol. Below, unaware of the decision just made, Daniel wiped sweat from his face and looked back at the gravity sphere. The real trial, it seemed, had only just begun. The arena lights dimmed to a deep violet, signaling a transition that most spectators had never witnessed before. A low vibration spread through the stadium walls, subtle at first. Conversations faded, applause stopped. Captain Droxel stood unnaturally still, his glowing eyes fixed on the upper observation chamber where the Dominion commanders watched. For the first time since entering the arena, the legendary warrior looked uncertain. "Captain," Daniel said quietly, "what's happening?" He lowered his head slightly, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. A faint pulse of light traveled along the seams of his armor, then faded. "The Dominion has made a decision," Droxel finally said, his voice heavier than before. "They have activated Champion Protocol." Some spectators leaned back, others stood abruptly, and several Vayer officials began leaving their seats altogether. It wasn't part of a normal arena trial. Daniel's stomach tightened. What does that mean? Droxel's gaze returned to him, and for the first time, before Daniel could ask more, the arena floor trembled violently, the gravity sphere. Between them began to glow from within, thin cracks of white light spreading across its dark surface like lightning trapped in stone. The containment field flared, alarms ringing across the stadium as technicians scrambled in control rooms above. "This was never about strength," Droxel said quietly. Daniel's heart pounded. The sphere split open, not explosively, but smoothly, its surface unfolding into petal-like segments that revealed a core of swirling energy at its center. The crushing weight that had defined the object vanished instantly, replaced by a strange, humming presence that felt almost alive. Daniel stepped back instinctively. "What is that?" Droxel's voice dropped to a near whisper. "A relic." The arena fell completely silent. "For millennia," Droxel continued, "the Dominion has searched for individuals capable of synchronizing with relic cores. They are fragments of an ancient civilization that existed before most known species evolved. Technology beyond comprehension. They were tests." "Yes," Droxel said, "not of strength. Of adaptability, perception, persistence. Traits required to interface with relic intelligence, forming patterns that resembled flowing symbols. Soft waves of light extended outward, brushing across the arena floor like invisible tides. Every electronic system flickered, translators glitching, lights pulsing out of sync. Then the energy focused. On Daniel, a beam of pale light stretched from the relic core and touched his chest. Pain didn't come. Instead, Daniel felt oceans floating in space, beings of pure luminescence shaping stars like clay. The images flashed too quickly to understand, yet their emotional weight was overwhelming. Loneliness, curiosity, creation, loss. Daniel staggered. Droxel stepped forward, but stopped himself, recognizing something sacred unfolding. The relic's light intensified. Daniel heard a voice, not through his ears, but directly within his thoughts. Compatible. The word echoed like distant thunder. Above, Dominion commanders erupted into urgent discussion. Displays filled with cascading data, predictive models collapsing under new variables. The outcome they had hoped for was happening. but not as expected, because the relic wasn't responding to Dr. It was responding to the human. Daniel fell to one knee, overwhelmed by the flood of sensations. He saw glimpses of countless species attempting this connection, most failing instantly, some surviving briefly. The captain said softly, "You were meant to replace me." Daniel looked up, eyes wide. "Replace you?" "I have been the Dominion's champion for 20 cycles," Droxel said. "Every arena trial, every conquest, every demonstration, all in preparation for relic selection." The realization struck Daniel like a physical blow. "This wasn't entertainment," he whispered. "No," Droxel said. "With succession." The relic's light flared again. Daniel's body lifted slightly off the ground, suspended within the glowing beam. Energy patterns traced across his skin, forming shifting constellations that mirrored the ancient symbols within the core. The crowd watched in breathless awe. A human engineer from a minor exploration vessel was undergoing transformation into something the Dominion had sought for centuries. Daniel's thoughts spiraled. "I'm not a champion," he said, voice trembling. "I fix broken machines." "I get lost in grocery stores." "Compatible," the voice repeated. Images flooded his mind again. Civilizations rising, falling, relics waiting in silence for minds capable of understanding rather than controlling them. The selection had never been about domination. It was about connection. Daniel's breathing slowed. The panic faded, because for the first time since entering the arena, he understood what the relic was searching for. Not the strongest, not the fiercest, but the one who refused to stop trying to understand. Below him, Droxel lowered his head in a gesture the arena had never seen before. Respect. The relic's light reached its peak, illuminating the entire stadium like a second sun. And as Dominion alarms shifted into ceremonial tones, one truth became impossible to deny. The human they had laughed at had just been chosen by something far older than their empire. The light surrounding Daniel softened, no longer blinding but warm, almost gentle, like sunlight filtered through water. Slowly, his feet touched the arena floor again. The glowing patterns across his skin faded into faint traces before disappearing entirely, leaving only the quiet echo of what had just happened. For several seconds, no one moved. The massive stadium, built for noise and spectacle, held a silence deeper than vacuum. Thousands of spectators stared at the human who had arrived as entertainment and now stood at the center of something sacred. Daniel looked down at his hands. They were the same hands that had fixed broken wiring, tightened bolts, and spilled coffee on control panels. They didn't look different. They didn't feel different. Yet inside his mind lingered fragments of impossible memories, stars being born, civilizations speaking in light, questions asked across millions of years without answers. Until now. Across. From him, Captain Droxel approached slowly. A towering warrior stopped a few steps away, then did something no Vaer champion had done in recorded history. He removed the armored crest from his shoulder, a symbol of his rank, victories, and authority, and placed it gently on the arena floor between them. "I was forged to lead through strength," Droxel said, his voice resonating across the silent stands. "But you lead through understanding." Daniel shook his head instinctively. "I'm not leading anything." Droxel's glowing eyes softened. "That belief is precisely why you were chosen." High above, the observation chamber doors opened. Dominion commanders stepped into view, their elaborate armor reflecting the relic's fading glow. The entire arena watched as the highest authority of the Vaer Empire descended toward the battlefield. Daniel's pulse quickened. This felt less like victory and more like standing at the edge of a life he hadn't agreed to. The Dominion Prime halted before him, towering even over Droxel, yet carrying none of the captain's intensity. Instead, the Prime's presence felt calm, measured, ancient. for cycles beyond counting. The Prime announced, "We believed power defined worth. Our empire expanded, our champions triumphed, and our certainty grew. Yet the relic remained. Silent. The Prime turned slightly, addressing the entire arena. Today, that silence ended. A ripple of emotion moved through the spectators. Confusion, pride, humility, awe. The Prime's gaze returned to Daniel. "Tell me, human, when you lifted the beam, what drove you?" Daniel hesitated, glancing around the massive arena. At Droxel, at the relic now dormant behind him. "I didn't want to quit," he said simply. "And when you faced the sphere?" "I tried to understand it." The Prime nodded slowly. "And when faced with transformation beyond comprehension," Daniel exhaled. "I was terrified." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the Prime's expression. "Exactly?" The Prime raised one hand, and the arena lights brightened once more, illuminating every spectator, every official, every warrior present. "Strength conquers obstacles," the Prime said, "but curiosity transcends them. Persistence reshapes them. Humility connects with them. The relic did not choose a conqueror. It chose a learner." Daniel felt the weight of those words more than any beam or sphere. "But I don't know what to do," he admitted. The Prime stepped closer. "You continue being what you already are." Daniel frowned slightly. "An engineer?" "A human," the Prime replied. The simplicity of the answer settled over the arena, like calm after a storm. Droxel retrieved the crest from the ground and held it out, not as a command, but an offering. Daniel looked at the symbol, then back at Droxel. "I can't replace you," Daniel said. Droxel shook his head. "You are not replacing me. You are redefining the role." Daniel slowly accepted the crest, not as a trophy, but as responsibility. In the stands, something unexpected began. Applause, explosive, not forced, but growing organically. A few spectators first, then dozens, then hundreds, until the entire arena resonated with a sound Daniel had never imagined hearing in an alien empire that once laughed at him. Respect. Drox ill stood beside him. Not above. The Prime turned toward the crowd. "Let this day be recorded not as the rise of a new champion, but as the evolution of our understanding." The relic behind them emitted a soft pulse, almost like agreement. Daniel looked upward at the artificial stars once more. Earth still waited somewhere beyond them, unchanged, unaware that one of its quiet engineers had just altered the philosophy of an interstellar empire. He thought about his family, his friends, ordinary mornings, unfinished projects. A small smile. "Peered. Can I still fix things?" Daniel asked. Droxel let out a deep, rumbling chuckle. "It appears you just fixed an empire." The arena lights slowly dimmed as ceremony transitioned into history. Spectators began leaving not with laughter, but thoughtful silence. Conversations shifted from entertainment to reflection. Data archives filled with records of the day. Strength lost its monopoly over greatness. Daniel stood at the center of it all, still feeling ordinary. And maybe that was the point, because across galaxies filled with warriors, rulers, and legends, the moment that changed everything didn't belong to the strongest. It belonged to someone who kept trying when quitting was easier. Someone who asked questions when answers were absent. Someone who lifted not because he could, but because he wouldn't stop attempting. Far above the arena, beyond fleets and empires, the stars burned quietly as they always had. But somewhere among them, an ancient civilization's final question had finally been answered. Not by power, but by humanity. The arena of Carthos Prime had never been silent before. For centuries, it had echoed with roars, metal clashes, and the final cries of defeated warriors. Thousands of alien spectators filled the alone, unarmed, and completely still. The crowd did not cheer. They laughed. On the upper balcony, the warlords of the Vair. Dominion leaned forward in amusement. To them, humans were fragile creatures from a quiet blue planet, known more for art and music than strength. Their databases described humanity with words like average, adaptable, and sometimes unpredictable, but never powerful. Fleet captured a small human exploration vessel drifting near their territory. They saw an opportunity for entertainment. A harmless species could provide a harmless show. That was why Daniel Cross now stood in the arena. Daniel had been an engineer aboard the research ship Horizon. He was not a soldier, not an athlete, not even particularly famous back on Earth. Just a quiet man who loved machines, coffee, and late-night star maps. But fate had dragged him across galaxies into the heart of the Vair Empire, where strength was law and weakness was spectacle. A demonstration, they called it. A joke, everyone else called it. Across the arena gates, the ground trembled as something massive approached. The crowd's laughter grew louder. Daniel didn't look toward the gate immediately. Instead, he stared up at the sky dome above the arena, where artificial stars shimmered in perfect patterns. Somewhere beyond those lights was Earth. Somewhere beyond them were oceans, cities, and ordinary mornings he might never see again. Panic would not help. Fear would not change the outcome. All he had now was himself. A thunderous boom echoed as the gate lifted. The Vair captain stepped into the arena. Captain Droxel was a legend even among his own species. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his armored body resembled a fusion of stone and living muscle. Plates of dark biometal covered his limbs, and 4 glowing eyes scanned the battlefield with cold confidence. He was proof of their superiority. Next to him, Daniel looked painfully small. Droxel tilted his head, examining the human like one might examine an insect. Echoing voice across the arena. So this is the creature that calls itself human. More laughter rippled through the stands. Daniel remained silent. I am told, Droxel continued, that your species believes in potential. That you claim greatness lies hidden within you. Tell me, little engineer, do you believe that? Daniel swallowed. His throat felt dry, but his voice, when it came, was steady. I believe you don't know. U.S. The translator repeated his words, and for a brief second, the arena quieted. Then Droxel laughed. The sound was heavy, almost geological, like rocks grinding together. Every species says the same before they fall. A signal flashed above the arena floor, and mechanical pillars rose from the ground. Suspended between them was a massive alloy beam, easily weighing several tons. It hovered just above the surface, humming with stabilizers. The trial is simple, announced the arena A. Lift the beam. Demonstrate strength. Survive. Gasps. If you cannot lift it, the demonstration ends. Daniel stared at the beam. Its metallic surface reflected distorted images of the crowd, thousands of alien faces waiting for failure. He flexed his fingers unconsciously. Back on Earth, he had helped move engine components, repaired structural frames, and once lifted a fallen support bar to free a trapped coworker. Nothing heroic, just necessary moments where hesitation wasn't an option. But this was different. A juvenile weight for Droxel could crush a human spine. Daniel stepped forward anyway. The ground felt strangely warm beneath his boots. He could hear his heartbeat, steady but loud in his ears. As he approached the beam, memories flickered through his mind. His father teaching him to fix bicycles. His mother telling him that humans survived because they kept trying, even when logic said stop. Humanity's strength had never been about size. It had always been about persistence. He crouched beside the beam. From the stands, whispers began replacing laughter. Is he serious? He will break himself. Why does he not surrender? Droxel. crossed his massive arms, watching with curiosity rather than mockery now. Daniel placed his hands beneath the cold metal. The weight pressed down instantly, like gravity had multiplied. His muscles screamed in protest, and his knees trembled. For a split second, doubt surged through him. This was impossible. The aliens were right. He was outmatched, outscaled, an out-of-place dot, but then something shifted, not in his muscles, in his mind. He stopped thinking about winning, stopped thinking about the crowd, stopped thinking about Droxel. All he thought about was lifting. A slow breath filled his lungs, and Daniel Cross began to push. The beam did not move. The crowd chuckled again, but Daniel did not stop. Seconds stretched into long, painful moments. Sweat dripped down his face, his arms shook violently, and tiny sparks of pain traveled across his spine. Yet beneath that pain was something else, a stubborn refusal to quit that had carried humanity through ice ages, wars, and the emptiness of space. Droxel's amusement faded, because the beam trembled dot just slightly, barely noticeable, but it moved. The arena fell silent. Daniel's teeth clenched as he pushed harder, every muscle firing, every breath turning into a strained growl. The beam rose another fraction, enough to break its stabilizer lock and trigger warning lights across. The pillars. Gasps erupted. Droxel leaned forward dot, and for the first time since entering the arena, the Veer captain was no longer laughing.